All right. This is the Brown Duke Gun Show. My name is JP. I'm here today with Brandon. We are the official podcast for Century Defense Indoor Range. If you're in Lafayette or Youngsville area, please come shoot with us at our range. We've got a great bunch of guys that can help you out with whatever you need. Today, we're going to talk about self-defense. I'll be honest with you. This is round 2 or round 3 now for self-defense with some technical difficulties. So, but hopefully we can get through this one.
Yeah.
And what we're going to look at really is just the person who is looking to get into the firearm arena, get a gun for their protection, right? And so, a lot of folks will find themselves in positions where they feel threatened in one way or another, and they feel like they need to purchase a firearm for their protection. And, really that falls into two camps, where you can either be in a proactive camp where you're preparing for the event that you hope doesn't happen, right? But you're ahead of the game in a sense where you're gonna, do training, do practice, and get up to speed on law. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And on the other side, we're also going to talk about the person who maybe something has happened to them, some event where they feel like now they need to have a gun to protect themselves. And really, in that situation, what do you do to get prepared since you're kind of reacting to an event, right? And so, our first and our general thought is that if you feel like you want to have a firearm for protection, then you really need to think about, preparing ahead of time. That means learning how to shoot, practicing, getting good instruction for the mechanics of shooting a firearm, then, self-defense tactics, things of that nature. Really, you almost want to think about this like you are doing, a long-range personal training for yourself, like you're going to the gym or you're learning a martial art or something like that, because there are a lot of parallels between the two, right?
Yep.
So, I think the first step is really, go to a range like Century, go pick out a firearm, and what pistol, rifle, whatever you feel like, and really, start to, look at training, learn how to shoot it, right?
Yeah, we always suggest like a concealed carry class. That would be a great class to start out with. And at first people are like, well, I'm not looking to conceal carry a gun. It's like, no, you don't have to. But it teaches you the laws. It teaches you all the safety parts of a handgun. It teaches you nomenclature of the gun, like how to grip the pistol, all the skills and fundamentals and all that stuff. But I think the law part, like justification for use of deadly force, is the most important thing to learn at the beginning, right?
Right.
To where like, hey, when can I use this thing, and when can I not use this thing? That's great to know. Even if you don't even own a gun, right? You might have to borrow a gun or something like that from someone. You should still know that.
Right.
After that would be like a skill-based thing, to where if you taking private lessons or taking training from an instructor, learning how to shoot the gun effectively and what you need to learn a gun. And then would be the tactics part.
Right.
Like where do I stage a gun in my house? How do I get to that gun? If something does happen, like what is going to happen to my kids? Where do I need to put them at? Do I need to go find them? Do they stay in their room? All those things. That's whenever you figured out that after.
Right. And one thing we hadn't touched on in our other tries to do this show, you also want to think about, your legal protection, right?
Yeah.
And I know there are a lot of companies who sell that prepaid legal and stuff like that. It's something to seriously consider, right? Because if you are preparing for a situation, then, if you were to find yourself in a place where you'd had to discharge your firearm and all of that stuff, you still may be in the right. You may know the law, but you're still going to have to take the ride. You're still going to have to talk to the police. You're still going to have to go through all of that. You may have to go to court, all of these types of things, right?
Yeah, we do talk about that in our concealed carry class. Like, what do you do after a shooting? Like after everything happens, like what happens now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What to tell the police, how to contact an attorney, do all those things. But I do have some legal protection that offers attorneys that have already been vetted, which is pretty nice. So, but you should at least like have an attorney that you know you're going to call, or have some type of legal protection like that, right? So don't sit in a jail cell and be like, hey, which one looks good on the yellow pages, right? Like, know who you're going to call at that time beforehand. Kind of vet those people. That would be a great idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of the like the USCCA, US Law Shield, those are two of the most popular ones. Having those available or being members to those, that way they can handle all that might be more useful for you. The new law that passed with the concealed carry part is if you have a concealed carry permit and you're justified in a shooting, then you don't go to civil court, which is a huge thing, right? So that kind of like takes off of all the parts that people can sue you civilly for, right? If it's inside your home or anything like that. So getting a concealed carry permit is still a great idea. Even if you don't need one.
For sure. Yeah. And we talked about that on the show for constitutional carry, right? That even if you're in a state like Louisiana or somewhere else that has constitutional carry, you still need to go, in my opinion, go take a class, learn what the law is, right? And keep up with it. And, because the law changes, right?
Yeah. They like have hundreds of laws that go through Louisiana, just in Louisiana alone, not much like federal laws and all that stuff. So there's always stuff that changes every year. Thankfully, we have politicians and we have some people that work as lawmakers that let us know what's going through the House and what's going through the Senate, which is super beneficial because even before it gets passed, they're they're just like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. And then we'll start watching it and following it. And that way, whenever it does get up passed, whenever people are calling in, they're like, hey, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? We at least have some type of knowledge about it.
Sure.
Right. We might not have read the whole law because, there are like pages and pages of that stuff, but we have an idea about what's going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, all right. So let's say, we're someone who wants to prepare, be on the proactive side of self-defense, right? I think the first part is, yes, go in, let's pick a firearm that you're comfortable with, test that out, make your purchase, have that firearm, right? What types of training do you think, do you need to get initially to be ready?
I think that like, it doesn't have to be a bunch of training. You don't have to be a world champion shooter. You don't have to do like, shoot every day. We shoot every day, but like, you don't have to do that. I would say minimum would be one time a month. Come in and shoot the gun, and that way you can get familiar with the grip, you can get familiar with sights, like all that stuff is kind of subconscious. You're not going to probably like gain skill that way, but you'll like maintain what you have at one time a month. I think ideally would be every other week, right? If you can come every other week, 2 times a month, that would be perfect. You can shoot a box of ammo. It's like 50 rounds, it's, under $20 or so.
Right.
So it's not super expensive. And if you can do that, you'll gain skill. You'll know what to do. Like on the skill side, right? So all the mental sides, that's going to be like homework things that you're going to do separate. But at least whenever you're reaching for your gun, you're not having to look at your gun and be like, hey, how do I position my hands again? How do I look at my sights? Like all that stuff's going to be subconscious if you're doing that.
How do I flip the safety off if there's a safety?
Yeah, exactly. So like, I think that's super beneficial. And like you reference it to martial arts, same thing with martial arts, right? Like you get 2 guys that are in a street fight, they're both fighting each other out. But if you get one of those guys that's like in a martial arts gym for maybe 3 months, right? It doesn't have to be long, just like 3 months, and he can be the worst one at that gym. He's still going to dominate in that fight, right? Because he knows just like a little bit,
right,
very small amount. So coming to the range and knowing just a little bit, that's going to put you way ahead of the curve.
No, and I think you can expect if you're brand new, right, and you're moving into this role where you're getting a self-defense gun. You can expect that your round count is going to be a little bit higher in the beginning, and it can kind of tail down to the end. So your first couple of trips, you may be spending 100 rounds, at a time. But as you get more comfortable and you can push that target out further and further, and you're holding the same group, then definitely it might be even a practice where you have 20 rounds or 30 rounds just to make sure you can still hold that group, And then especially if you use training tools like dry fire, where you don't have any ammo in the gun at all, and you're still, practicing your grip, practicing your draw, things of that nature, things that you'll need in a self-defense situation.
And I think like that's on a professional side of it, you can we saw that with Blake this year at IPSC Nationals, right? Like I had to hear about that for a month until I beat him in the next match. But for 1 month, he was for sure like calling me and making sure that I knew that he beat me, right?
Yeah.
But so he has hundreds of thousands of rounds down range, and for the whole past year, he hasn't shot a gun.
Right.
Like, we used to practice, every week at his place and once a week at my place. So it was like twice a week we'd practice together. And this whole past year, I haven't practiced with him because he's running for Senate. He's doing all the politics stuff, so he hasn't been able to touch a gun.
Right.
And IPSC National comes around. He's like, hey, I'm going to start practicing again like a week or 2 weeks before IPSC Nationals. Picks up a gun. We start practicing together. We leave for IPSC Nationals, and he comes in second.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
So it's like, yeah, those skills, they are perishable and they're going to lose, but like you can gain them back very, very quickly.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So, yes, same thing. If you put all the rounds at the beginning of it, towards the end, you can kind of just like do very minimum stuff just to maintain what you have.
Sure.
And that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's also evident with like a less high level shooter, like world champion, like Miguez, right? I can tell you just from my experience that, last year, and you got on me, you're like, JP, you're not practicing enough, right? Like my bucket of ammo wasn't, going down. But, I was still able to pick up, and practice a week or two before IPSC Nats. And I didn't do as well as I normally would do, but I was maybe 5 to 10% off of where I should be, and for not having practiced, and I mean, really, yes, you say it all the time, right? You fall back to your highest level of training or mastery or something like that.
Yeah, like you won't rise to the occasion. You'll always fall to a level of training that you've mastered.
Yes,
right?
That's right. And that's where, the fundamentals that I had, it was just, okay, well, I'll just shoot based on that and we'll see where we are. And it wasn't really too far off. But that said, we put it in the beginning.
Yeah. Like you shot over 100,000 rounds in a couple of years. And it's like, okay, this is going back to that.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
I don't think you're just going to like automatically buy a gun and it be some type of magical, item that's just going to keep away criminals. Like it's not going to happen that way.
Yeah.
Right. Like you need to practice with the gun. You need to make sure that you're up to date with it and you can use it in self-defense stuff.
Right. And I've heard you say this before, but as a new shooter, a brand new shooter to pistols, there is a level before you reach proficiency that you're really kind of a danger to yourself and to others until you really master that thing, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that to scare people, but I want people to realize that it's not just something, like you say, that you can just pick up and automatically do.
Right. Yeah, it's not something that you just like jump to doing it proficiently. And a lot of times, like whenever people first get into guns, if they haven't messed around with them, they're very humble and they're like, hey, I want to learn things. And if they sign up for a private lesson, it's like you win, right? Because like you're starting from scratch and it's great. And then they get to a level where they think they know stuff, right? And they're like, oh, like I know what I'm doing. You see this a lot in people that use firearms like as their job, with military or like law enforcement, things like that. They're like, well, I don't need to know anymore. Like I'm proficient enough. Right. And they kind of become cocky. And it's like, that's whenever the danger starts happening, right? Like, oh, I don't need to check the gun or clear it or do anything like, cause I'm proficient enough. It's like, no. Like you're never proficient enough, right?
Correct.
Like you always go back to fundamentals. You always can learn more and do things. So as you continue growing, then you think you know everything. And then you realize like, hey, I don't know anything again.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So then you got go through that cycle. And it kind of humbles you again. And then you realize like I can learn more stuff all the time.
Sure.
Right? Like I'm a student for life. Like this is how it's going to be. And I can always go back to training. A funny story, like a couple years ago, went to Max's place and he calls me. He's like, hey, it was probably like January or so. And our shooting season usually ends, for the people that don't know, it's like from November till around like February or so. We don't have any matches then. Right. So we took off, both of us, and by taking off, I mean like you're shooting probably like once a week, once every other week or so. Right. And not every day. Right. So he calls me around January. He's like, hey, you want to start practicing? I need to get back into practicing and shooting. I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. Right. Like I get to practice with Max. Right. So I'm like, but just give me a week to where like I can like brush up on my skills and stuff. Like I don't want to go over there and, embarrass myself. So he's like, yeah, whatever, whenever schedule opens up, just let me know. So a week later, he calls me, and during this week I'm like going Blake's, like I'm practicing stages and like all this stuff, like setting up courses, practicing swingers and bobbers, like everything, right? So I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll make it over there. He calls me again. So I drive over there the next week, and he has 2 targets set up, and we shoot like 700 rounds at 2 targets. We shoot 666 and like 20 alpha.
Oh,
right?
geez.
That's
Like
it.
the whole
the
day?
whole practice. And I'm like, so when are we gonna do anything else? And he's like, no, this is what we're doing. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, you got to go back to the basics. If you take that long off, you got to go back to the basics. So on the ride back, I was just reflecting. I was like, you know what? I was like, if the multi-world champion is shooting this every February,
Right.
guess what I need to be doing?
Yes.
Going back to basics every single time.
Absolutely.
So you're never better than the basics. You always go back to fundamentals. You're always working on that to try to get better and regain your skills.
Yeah. No, I totally 100% agree. So, so go into building skills though. Like, so if you're brand new, so now you have a gun, you've signed up for some training, practice, right? Like, I think that, we mentioned it in some of the ones that, where the camera died, but there's a difference between training and practice.
Yes.
Right?
I think that training would be something where you go, you find an instructor, you hire an instructor that can pinpoint things that you're doing wrong and critiquing things that you're doing wrong to where you can learn what to practice, right? So after you go take training, you're writing down all your notes, you take them in your phone or, write them down on a piece of paper, and then go back on your own term without like paying an instructor and practice those things until you master them.
Right.
Once you've mastered them and say, okay, like this is where I'm at, I'm hitting a plateau, then you go back and take more training and you build off of that. So that's how the learning is supposed to happen. And anything that you do, that's how it's supposed to happen, right? Like you take golf, like I don't play golf. I'd probably break a bunch of clubs, but I'd love to get into it because I think it's the same type of sport. Like there's so much stuff that you can learn. You can never master it truly.
Correct.
So if you do play golf, it'd probably be like, hey, I'm going to sign up for lessons. You're not going to be better the first day that you walk off the golf course, right? So like with that trainer. So you take training and then you go back home and you keep doing your homework until you're like, all right, I've mastered this level. Then you can move on to the next step. Because really like there's going to be a part where if you come in for training for me, I'm going to tell you like, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. We really can't go anywhere else until you fix that.
Right.
Like until you fix your gripper, until you stop anticipating the recoil of the gun, like I can tell you other things, but you can't apply them.
The high level stuff is,
you can't apply it.
Yeah.
So once you do it and like, hey, I'm not anticipating the gun anymore, I've broken that habit, then you can come back and take more training and then we can apply those things and you can grow as a shooter.
Yeah. So, and I think, one last thing I will say, and it's a shameless plug for shooting sports, but once you feel really comfortable just, holding a group and shooting, essentially, if you can hit the same target over and over again in a booth or something, my recommendation and my challenge to you, any listener who's not participated before, is to go out and try one of the shooting sports. It doesn't have to be ours. It doesn't have to be USPSA or whatever. IDPA is fine. Any sort of that type of practical shooting event is fine. NRA even, it's fine. The bullseye stuff. The point is that those are situations that put you under a level of stress that you would not normally be under, right? And if you think about you're doing this for self-defense, you want to put yourself in a controlled, stressful environment to see what happens to your fundamentals when you get put in that stressful environment, right? Because I can tell you, as somebody who's been running the club for 6 years, we get new shooters almost every week. We're especially getting back to that level now. We're having 2 or 3 new shooters every week, and you can tell that they can hold a group. They're safe and they know how to be safe. But once they put those skills into action, into something else that they're not used to, right? And this isn't even combat. We don't even pretend to be combat, right? You start to put your skills to the test in a sense. It's a very eye-opening experience for people because things don't go the way they think it was going to go.
You're right. And all it is just like a buzzer and other people watching you, right?
Yeah.
And like I remember like first starting competition, it's like, all right, like now all these people are like watching, I have to perform at this time, right? And now like getting to a national level and things, like I don't focus on that as much. It's just like, hey, I'm really focused on where do I load the gun, where do I not load the gun, and skill sets. But like there's still some times where not in the shooting community, but like if other people are there, that like are not in the shooting community, which should be like the easiest thing, right? Because they don't even know what they're looking at. But like the other day, I shoot at nationals, never get nervous about like other people watching me. You know, I get nervous about not performing or like have those that adrenaline rush, and like that's what competitors like, right? Like we love those things. But the other day, like someone came and watched me shoot that wasn't a shooter in USPSA, right? Like just started shooting and getting into shooting sports or getting into shooting for self-defense. And they came and watched me, and I was nervous. I was like, why am I nervous? Like they don't even know what they're looking at right now, but like I was nervous about it. And it's just that person meant something like that was there. So it's like, okay, now I need to really perform for that person, you know?
Right.
So doing that in a competition setting will help you, because now you really know like, hey, what's subconscious and what's not subconscious.
Correct.
Right. And during that time, like that's all I'm thinking about is like that person. Like that person's watching me. I'm not thinking about anything else, but like I performed great, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, now I know like where my skills are at. Like I know like this is all subconscious. I messed up here, so that's not subconscious yet. I need to like focus on that during practice. So I help you do that. And you had said like what level of training you need to be at to start doing that. I constantly get that question all the time. Like I tell people, hey, come and shoot on Thursday nights. And they're like, oh, well, I'm not good enough. You are good enough. Right. Like you're good enough right now. As long as you are safe with the gun, and you're not pointing the gun at people and like having your finger on the trigger, you're good enough to come and shoot competition. You don't have to shoot bullseyes. And they all think like, hey, I'm gonna start practicing. And once I reach a level where I can shoot bullseyes every single time, then I'll be ready for competition. And it's like, no, don't do that. Like, you know, you'll never get to where you want to be on your own time. Like you're never going to think you're good enough to start competition. Right. No one ever does. Right. They start competition thinking like, hey, I shouldn't probably be here. And then they end up doing well, or like, even if they don't do well, that you know what to practice. And everybody's like supportive about it. No one's really caring about what your scores are. Like no one cares. No one judges you. No one's like, man, like you didn't do good that time. Like you never hear that from the club, right? No. Like, and if you are from a club that goes that, like, don't go back. Like go to a different club. Like there are tons of clubs. I've never heard someone ever say that in any club, but there is a ton of way more clubs that are like, hey man, that was a great run. Yeah. And they're wanting to help out. Right. They're like, if you ask them, sometimes they won't go forth and like tell you what you need to do, because a lot of times people don't take that well, right? Like if you tell them like, hey, you should do this, like they're like, well, why are you telling me that? You know? Right. But if you go and ask them like, hey, how can I get better? You're going to get flooded with people. Yeah. Right. They're going to be like, oh, like you should do this, you should do that. Right. Is it all good information? Probably not. Like, but there's probably some good information out there that you can get to. But yeah, the top level guys, like if you ask them a question, I've never heard of one of them being like, oh, well, I'm not going to tell you because, you know, I don't want you to beat me. Like,
no, that's not a thing. That's not a thing.
No top level guy is going to tell you that, right? Yeah. Like if you ask anyone what you should do, they're going to be more than happy to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you know, the one last thing I'll say about it is that, you know, people get so wound up about the scores. Yeah. You know, and if you're doing this again because you are somebody who wants to be prepared for the fight, right? The scores do not matter. Like, don't pay attention to the scores. You know, you just want to make sure that under duress, you can hit what you want to hit when you want to hit it.
And more importantly, you're there that week. Yeah. Right. Like that's what shooting
sports. They're rounds down range.
Yeah. That's what shooting sports does. Is like, we have like a bunch of police officers that come now, and it's the reason why they come into matches. Like I've heard them say is because it's like it gets them there. Yeah. Right. Because they know like, hey, if it's just going to the range, they make up excuses, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, well, I can go next week, or I can go tomorrow, whenever my shift's off or whatever. Like having it on Thursday nights, and it's like, hey, they have a league night here and I have to be there. Right. Like to make this league night, it makes them come and it makes them shoot. Correct. Right. So they're like, this is great. Mm-hmm. And they're shooting once a week, once every other week. Like, I mean, Luke can't shoot every week because he's working on certain ones. Mm-hmm. But like on the days that he's off and he's not on duty, he comes and shoot, and he's like tremendously better as a shooter the past year. Yeah. Like I remember whenever he first started compared to now, like now he's going to be a firearms instructor. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, before that, he probably wasn't even like a contender. Right. Like not saying that he was a bad shooter, but it's like he wasn't shooting it often. And now that he's shooting it every other week, like he's gaining skills, and he's probably the best shooter in his like
Probably
department.
at
you
least
know?
one of them. Yeah, for sure.
One of them for I don't know everybody over there, but like all the rest of them I've seen, Luke's the best shooter.
Oh,
they have.
certainly. Yeah. Of all the other folks. Yeah. And that's the thing though. It's like they can catch up.
They can.
You know,
They
it's
just
just,
gotta
you
show
have to
up.
put the time in.
You just gotta show up. That's it. That's all you gotta do.
And, you know, I was having this conversation actually with Barney the other day. And I think I have this conversation with Barney a lot. It's like, remember where you started. You know, it's like, I understand that you may be trying to beat somebody, you know, or beat a set of people or reach a certain classification. And that's great. Like, it's good to have those goals. And yeah, it keeps you motivated. But don't look at it as like, I can never beat Brandon or something like that. Like, look at it like, how good of a shooter am I, you know, today versus a year ago versus 2 years ago, 5 years ago? And it's like, you are way better.
Yeah. Even if you don't beat that person, like look at the percentages. Like, so Chris and David always ask me to shoot like on USPSA nights.
Yeah.
Just because they want to like see where they rank at, right?
Sure.
Like they know like, hey, I'm not going to beat you at this match, but if I can get to 80%, like that's a win for me.
Right.
If I can get to 85%, whatever it might be, whatever their number is, that's like, hey, I'm getting better because I know where he's at on the national level.
Right.
So if I can compare that, that's what they want to see.
Right.
And like I remember Barney and there was somebody else that were going back. I think it was him and Ronald at the beginning. And they're like, man, I just can't never beat this person, right? Like they're always ahead of me. I think I'm just plateauing. I don't know if I want to keep doing this or whatever. I'm like, no. Like you think that you're not getting any better. You're both getting better.
Correct.
Right? Because you're both here
Everybody's
every week.
getting better.
Everyone's getting better, right?
So,
and that's why our club dominates at local matches and stuff that we go to other places because we shoot every week.
Right.
Some of these outdoor places, they just shoot once every 6 months because the other 5 are rained out or have issues with the range. Whereas no matter what happens, we're shooting.
Right. Absolutely.
Rain or shine, we're shooting at Century.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. You got, you need to shoot. You need to shoot often and find, the club is good because it gives people a reason, like you say, to just come in there and they actually don't think about like, hey, I'm not, it's more of they're shooting the match. They're not like, oh, I'm actually going to work on my trigger press or anything like that. It's, they get into the game of it, but the game actually elevates the skill.
It helps. So. And what it does is also like take note of what you're not good at, right? Like a lot of times people would just shoot matches and they get stuck in that. They're like, oh, well, I'm not going to the range to practice. I'd rather go shoot a match. It's like, yeah, that's probably fun. It's better to do that, but you still need to go and practice. Like the things that you're messing up in a match, you're not going to get better unless you go to the range on your own time and sit in the booth and practice that.
Yeah.
So like if it's weak hand shooting or if it's reloads or if it's, you're throwing rounds off your last round because you're not follow through on the gun, like take note of that and then go. You can't change it in a match. Don't worry about changing in a match. Don't worry about fixing anything there, but go back to the range on your own time and fix those issues right away.
Yeah. All right. So we also need to talk about these are all things that you can do proactively to prepare, right? Yep. And we clearly feel strongly about a lot of them. If you are somebody who just found themselves in an unfortunate situation where somebody broke into their house or, being threatened or any number of different issues, and they're not yet up the training curve, right? Yep. But they come in to purchase a gun. What do you recommend to them?
I would say, same steps, right? Like you need to know law, like very beginning and try to focus on that. Get that stuff knocked out of the way, even if you have to stay up all night. Like it's not that much stuff to learn, but you're going to have to learn when am I justified, when am I not justified, right? Do different situations. Kind of going into that, we talk about like white lights, like, hey, you need white lights on handguns or next to your bedside gun. And people are like, well, I don't really need that. I just need the gun. And it's like, no, you do need that because you can't shoot shadows there in your house, right? And we get in concealed carry classes all the time. People are like, well, if they're in my house, like, I'm just going to shoot them. It's like, you're going to shoot a family member that might be breaking into your house to see if you're okay. Like, because they can't get in contact with you on your cell phone. Like, well, they shouldn't be in my house. Like, you're saying that right now out of anger because like you're learning that, hey, that's probably not a good thing. And if you do, and let's say if you're still justified doing that, you have to live with that for the rest of your life, right? Yeah. So like make sure that you are like okay with doing things, right? So like you have to have white light, you have to do all those things. You have to know the law. The other thing for person that's reacting is now like time's against you. So on the skill side, you really gonna have to focus on this like every day. right? Because like if you're worried about someone breaking into your house like tomorrow or tonight, like you should be exhausting all of your energy. If you're not at work, like, hey, I'm dry firing, I am picking up the gun, I'm handling the gun. It can even be just like, hey, make sure the gun's unloaded and picking up the gun on your kitchen table every day.
Yeah,
Right. Like
absolutely.
picking it up 10 repetitions, and then putting it back down, making sure your grip's right, making sure your stance is right, and then putting it away.
Yeah.
And doing that multiple times throughout the day to where whenever you do, like if that happens that night, whenever you pick up the gun, it's subconscious. Like,
Right.
hey, I know my grip's in the right spot.
Absolutely.
So you're just gonna have to like kind of cram for a test, like cram for it at gun handling, making sure you're doing it safely, number one, and then knowing the skill part.
Well, I think that, a couple of things there, right? The white light is actually an important thing in so far as that if you're not really comfortable with aiming yet, right?
Yep.
And that's not subconscious to you. That I've heard you mention it to other people before. It's like if you have the light on your firearm and you put that light and you shine it on somebody and that's a threat, then you're naturally almost aimed already.
Yeah.
Right.
Like if you put if the light is connected to your gun, right? Like we set up Katie's gun like that, and set up a bunch of other people that came in like, hey, I'm leaving for work. Something happened in my neighborhood. I want my wife to have a firearm or whatever it might be. Like put a white light. They're always worried about lasers and things, but lasers have a lot of issues with them. Sometimes they're zeroed, sometimes they're not, and they just don't work out very well.
Correct.
But yeah, you put a white light with a very hot spot, like a very deep hot spot. If you put in that hot spot on the target, like within 10 yards, that's your laser.
You're already aimed.
You're aimed in. So like, even if they have it like at chest height or something, they can't see the sights. If they're putting that white light directly on the target, they're gonna hit the target at 10 yards.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
I'm pretty confident about doing that. So yeah, that could be like an easy spot to where like, hey, I don't have to worry about sight alignment or sight picture.
Right.
I'm just looking at the target and putting the hot spot on there, see it, press the trigger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's a good benefit. It's not like an end all be all. Like don't focus just on that and don't be like, hey, this is all I need.
No.
No. Like continue to like train with looking at your front sight, because you hear that a lot of times too. Like, well, I'm not gonna train to look at my front sight because in self-defense I'm not gonna do that. It's like, no, the reason why we train to look at our front sight is to where it happens subconsciously.
Right.
Yes. So still continue to train that way, but like that could be an easy fix for that day.
Correct. Yeah. Because all of these are crutches, right?
Yeah,
these
crutches.
are all things to get you to a certain level of initial proficiency to fix a short-term problem.
Yep.
Right. The correct answer long-term is that you adopt some of, the training strategies that we're talking about. Essentially get training practice, keep up with it, adopt it as a lifestyle versus a short-term thing that you're doing, that level of preparation you have to have. So, but what we're mentioning now, if you're not in a place where you can prepare very quick, over a long haul, the light is a crutch. The some of these other things, laser. I also don't recommend a laser for self-defense, but it is also a crutch. If you have one, it's a crutch, right? And it's a crutch that you need to work off of with training, right? Because at the end of the day, the situation that you want to be in is that you want to be able to, through your body index, when you need to shoot, your body automatically does the right thing.
Yep.
And you don't have to think about it.
Yep.
So
it's the same thing like you said about like going to the gym, right? Like if you're preparing for something and all of a sudden like let's say if your kid has like a color run or something at school or whatever, it's like, hey, this is gonna be a 5K color run and it's gonna happen this month. It's like, oh man, like I'm eating potato chips on the couch all day. Like I gotta figure out how I can like keep up with this kid,
right?
And at least walk it, right? Like and not be out of breath. But if you're like living a healthy lifestyle and like you're going to the gym every day, like you can learn about it the day before and be like, all right, let's go, right? Like I can run 3 miles. Like that's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
So like try to stay involved into that. Like try to stay at least like shooting the gun around that way in case you need it. Hey, I've already had those skills.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think the one other thing to mention, again, it's a self-defense crutch, but it's also another tool that you can use that's outside of just plain firearms. Is the tasers and the pepper sprays and all of those types of things, right?
Yep.
you know, the hard part about those, again, I think those are a short-term fix in a sense, because you can have them. They're non-lethal. They're, you know, I mean, they're a deterrent for sure. They'll hurt and all that stuff. But it's very difficult to practice with those.
Yeah.
Right. You know, like particularly a taser, you know, like if it's a taser that shoots the leads out and stuff like that, you can only do that once or twice.
Yeah. You can't keep reloading them and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, I think those things are for things that you don't need a gun for.
Correct.
Right. Like, don't think like, hey, I instead of buying a gun, I'm gonna buy this. Like, no, that's the stuff. Like, if you can't fight, like a fist fight, or you don't want to get into a fist fight, but you can't use a gun, that's the tools for that. Right. Like, that's what you use that for. It's not like, hey, I should probably need a gun because this guy's trying to kill me. I'm gonna get out a taser. No, like, you're gonna get out a gun if that person's trying to kill you.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just for if you can't defend yourself. And it's like on the edge of justification, right? Like, I should probably fight this guy, but I don't know how to do that. So let me do this just to get him off of me to where I can run away.
Let me get a non-deadly. Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that goes back to also, you need to know the law, because you were saying it, knowing the law, right?
Yeah.
But you need to know when it's applicable to use and safe for you to use those types of things, like a taser and a pepper spray, right? You know, if your life's not in danger, but you're in a physical altercation, again, that is a great tool, you know. But if your life's in danger, like you are under imminent threat, then it's like, okay, yeah, you really want a gun there.
The gun's always the answer.
Yeah.
Like, there's never a time where like you're like, hey, I'm gonna like take out a knife, or I'm gonna use this pepper spray, or this I'm gonna fight this person off, or like try to do anything. It's like, no. One of our buddies is a martial arts instructor, right? And he's like, the gun belt will always beat the black belt. Like, it doesn't matter how good you are at martial arts or whatever it might be. Like, if you need a gun, that's going to be the answer.
Right.
Like you never want to say like, hey, my life's in danger and this person's trying to kill me with a knife. I'm going to get in a knife fight with them. Like, no, knife fights suck. Like, everyone gets cut in a knife fight.
That's right. Yeah. No, I get it.
And same thing with pepper spray. Like, pepper spray is, it's not ideal. Like, you're going to get sprayed too.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Like,
yeah.
You're going to burn from that. You just got to hope that that other person thinks of you as like a easy target, and they're like, oh, this is not an easy target anymore. Let me run away.
Yeah,
right. That's what you're hoping for.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then, because that doesn't even take into account, and this tangent too, but like if they're methed up or something like that, you know, that kind of stuff, pepper spray is not going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, half the time, you know, if they're really tripped out, then, you know, shooting them doesn't really work.
Yep.
You know?
And even if they're not, like, if they're under the mindset of, like, if they really have that mindset, they're going to kill you, pepper spray is not going to stop.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. Like, you can spray me in the eyes. Like, if you injure my daughter or something like that, and my goal is to kill you, like, pepper spray is not going to stop me from killing you.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, that's just a little annoyance. Right. So, like, they think of you just as an easy target. If they really have the mindset to do that, that's not the answer.
Yeah,
the gun would be the answer.
Yeah. So, no, I think that's good. I think, and we got it in the can, and nothing stopped working. So nothing I think we'll have to, take our wins and stop it there. So, yeah, thanks, Brandon, and.